my name is Erika. I did graduate from Sacramento State with an ethnic studies degree, and I'm currently doing the Pathway Fellowship at Sacramento State. And this is the research I'm going to share with you that I did in the Pathway Fellowship program. And I'm just going to let you know what I gathered thus far, and also share my preliminary findings and my preliminary conclusion. So first I want to start off with some background. As you can see from this graph, the Latino population has dramatically increased since the 1970s. So in the 1970s, it was at 9.6 million, and now as of 2016, the population is at 57.5 million, meaning that the Latino population has exponentially grown in the past decades. However, our educational attainment is still very low. As 2014, Latinos age group 25 to 29, only 15% of them had a bachelor's degree. So that just shows the disparity. We have such large numbers, however, not all of us have bachelor's degrees. Now I want to take you to, there's a highlighted version of it. Now I want to take you the background of Chicana Latina women. So looking at Latinas, 1 in 5 women is Latina. So if we look around this room, 1 in 5 women is Latina, but I think most of us are. By 2060, Latinas will form a third of the female populations. And the thing that we see that is also positive, but we also need to keep in mind is, yes, Latinas have made a great stride to higher education. However, they are the least likely group of women to actually obtain a bachelor's degree. And also it's known that Latinas, oftentimes when they do go into the workforce or the educational force, they're both economically and educationally marginalized. So that's huge on what their success. Now for my research question, I decided to look at what shapes, how does the presence of the lack of, or so I'm going to look at how does the presence or lack of mentorship shape the experiences of Latina students in a comprehensive state university. And the reason I wanted to look at this is I just wanted to see the experiences Latina students have once they do enter the undergraduate studies, and see if there is any impact on them staying in education or dropping out. And the reason this is important is because the Latina educational attainment is both of political and socio-economic importance here in the United States. And it's not only closing the opportunity gap for Latinas, but it's also providing, enriching, society as a whole. For mentoring definitions, there's actually not a definitive mentoring definitions that scholars have come to agreement on. The one I use is from CRISP from 2000, I believe, 2009. And this is a definition they use. They come up with 4 types of mentorship that undergraduate students are, and most of them are emotional, psychological, academic, and also role model. So those are the key components undergraduate students need in order to feel like they're going to succeed in higher education. As for literature review, there was actually an abundance of literature review that did share how mentorship does impact students in higher education, and how positive faculty interactions maintain students in higher education and in academia. If they build a connection with mentors, they are more likely to stay in academia than to drop out. Another research finds, specifically looking at Latinos, Latinas, that having mentorship does make an impact in their academic trajectory, meaning if they make a connection with a faculty member, they're more likely to stay instead of dropping out. They also feel more included in their major than feeling isolated, which is really helpful. Another study specifically found that Latinos that have a mentor actually have a higher GPA than those that do not have mentors. So it does make an impact having a connection with someone within the institution. Now specifically looking at Latinas, I found that Latinas do not hold bachelor's degrees as much as other groups, as I said earlier, but also Latinas lack a lot of institutional support. So lack of mentorship, lack of resources. A lot of it has to do with financial burden, not feeling included in the institution. But even though they face all these barriers, it is so impactful that they find agency and guidance to help them through the educational trajectory. And one of the most interesting things that I found about this literature review is that women of color often are overlooked in the classroom, meaning women are not approached to have mentorship opportunities, meaning women are often sought as like, okay, you're gonna find out, let me pay attention to these males and, mentor them. So I think that's very impactful to look at, and why is it, right? So for my theoretical framework, I decided to use a meta theory. So I'm combining 2 theories to analyze the data I've collected. So for this one, I'm using intersectionality and also Crisp and Nora's 4 domains of mentorship. And for this, so for intersectionality, it was coined by Kenshaw in 1991, and it looks beyond the single-axis theories and incorporates race, class, gender, and sexuality. And specifically why I chose to use intersectionality is because I want to see if a person's race, class, gender, sexuality, identity impacted the type of mentorship opportunities they received in higher education. Looking at Norris and Cripps, their multiple dimension mentorship framework, there's 4 domains that capture the mentorship experience of undergrad students, which is psychological or emotional, and that's being able to provide, is for professors being able to provide listening and supportive environment. Goal setting and career path, this is where faculty members are able to help students and guide them through the educational trajectory. The following one is subject knowledge and support, which is just letting the student know about their academic field. And the last one is a role model, and it's just to learn from the past and present actions of a mentor, achievements and failures. And for methods, this was actually, I collected this data for a larger case study that analyzed Chicana Latina undergraduates' experience with graduate aspirations at a comprehensive state university. So with this data, I collected it, I want to say back in 2015. It was 10 undergraduate Chicana students majoring in the social science and interdisciplinary studies. Of the 10, 8 of them were the first person in their family to go into graduate school. Their age range was from 19 to 32. And how I collected my data is it was a purposeful and also snowball sampling. So what I did is I posted flyers around campus, and I also went to Latino-based organizations to get my participants to be part of this study. So for preliminary findings, I'm just going to go through a couple quotes that I've gathered through this research project. I haven't really teased all of them out, but I'll go off with the first one. So the first one has to do with the psychological and emotional support. And for this one specifically, it talks about how this student wasn't able to find mentorship within their department. So this student majored in government, and they identify as queer Chicana X, and they feel like they need to assimilate within this government's agenda in order to feel like she's going to get mentorship. And one of the things she talks about is she doesn't really want to assimilate, but she feels she has to assimilate in order to get that mentorship she needs and to seek a higher education. And she specifically talks about how there's identity politics in this. This professor is a white gay male, and she identifies, again, as a brown Chicana, and she feels like she's not able to find that mentorship. This professor cares more about gender and, equity and marriage, while she cares about trans and undocumented women in detention centers. So again, intersection plays a big role in how Chicana Latinas navigate the institution to find that support they need. And they also have to play the cards of what identity am I going to be using, right? What is the most salient one? And for this one, her most salient one was her queer LGBTQ identity, while also race played a part in this, right? So again, it's really hard for Latinas to find that mentorship that's going to cater to their all identity. The next one specifically talks about academic subject knowledge and support. And for this one specifically, it was a student who at the time decided to change her major from communications to ethnic studies. So she did go, she sought out guidance and support as a communication major at the time, and she felt totally rejected. So again, she calls out the racism she felt when she went to go talk to this white professor as the director of this major, and all she went is to get guidance in how do I navigate this degree, right? How can I pursue a career in this degree? And pretty much the faculty member or the director the advisor at the time was like, oh, it's a standard bachelor's degree. And that's all she gave her. And she didn't feel supported at all. And she felt because of her women, brown identity, that's why she was rejected. But then she talks about going to professors that look like her, specifically professors of color, and she's able to go and sit down in their office, and it doesn't need to be formal, it doesn't need to be academic. They see her for who she is and the potential she carries. So again, intersectionality plays a huge role in the types of mentorship Latina women are exposed to and they experience. The next one has to do with goal setting and career paths. So for this one, it highlights how important it is to have professors that look like you, that have similar experience as you, to guide you through the graduate education process. So for this student specifically, she went to 3 professors that really encouraged her to apply to a graduate degree. But specifically one professor she could relate to via her class and immigration status, that she found the most support. Again, she says, I like this professor, or I felt connected to this professor because we have class background. He is a Mexican immigrant just like me, and if he could do it, I could do it, right? And that's how she sees herself. Again, it's her class background, right? Her immigration status, also being a Latina in education and seeing another Latino in education really helps her solidify her belonging in education. So again, mentorship and institutionality play a huge role in the types of mentorship experiences Latina get. And the final one has to do with role model. So for this particular grant, she talks about how she's able to see one professor who happens to be an educational professor, and how she sees this professor not only inside the classroom but outside of the classroom. And they do danza, which is Aztec dancing. And she talks about how it's good that I could relate to this professor not only academically but culturally, right? It's important for me to see them not only in academia but also in the community. And that also makes me feel like I could belong and I could do the same. She talks about other professors that also grew up in poor urban settings, and how she could relate because at the end of the day she also grew up in poor urban settings. So again, it speaks to the volume that Chicana Latina women need faculty mentors that could relate to them, that have similar experience to them, that they could go to and find guidance and support. As for a preliminary conclusion, again, intersectionality is beyond important in looking at faculty-mentor relationships among Chicana Latina women. It also falls into the similar research Soloro, Yoso, Seca Rivas, and Ramirez have done, that Chicana Latina do face a lot of obstacles and barriers within the institution finding mentorship. I also want to highlight that Chicana Latina students have agency at the end of the day. Again, we see in these interview comments that even though they got rejected from one professor, they go on and find another one. And throughout the interview, a lot of, I wasn't able to put all of this in here, but throughout the interviews, a lot of Chicana Latina women had negative experiences with going to seek help from professors. And there was just a very few professors of color that were able to help them and guide them through their educational trajectory. And overall, they're able to thrive within higher education. And I'm hoping this research serves not only student services, but also universities to better know how to further help Chicana Latina, or further navigate and help navigate Chicanas through their educational trajectory. So this is my contact information, and that completes my presentation, and I'll take questions at the end.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, we'll do the Q&A after everyone's presented. All right, so our next presenter is Eric De Leon, currently a graduate student at California State University, Sacramento. The title of his presentation is Farm Working Communities, Education and Work.
Alright, so first, I want to welcome everyone, and also for giving me this time to be able to talk about my current thesis project. I'm trying to work with farm working communities, and I'm going to give you a little background. I'm a third generation farm working student, and my last semester of my undergrad, I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? So I went and where I could decide most of my thoughts, which is field work, and I'm like, oh, okay, I have a good GPA, I have all this, academically everything sounds good. But then I started listening to these wonderful farm working women's stories about like, oh, my daughter's going to Sacramento State, or my son's going to Fresno, and all these wonderful academic stories of people like me, of people that come from farm working backgrounds. And you know what? I haven't seen the parents' perspective in research as I was doing my research methods in my undergrad. So I started to listen and ask questions, and something that came up was like, oh, I wouldn't see my daughter or my son working in the field because it's so hard. But other parents would say, oh, well, I would want them to work because I want them how hard it is and appreciate it more. So just to give some context, some family members on the top, my aunts and my uncle. I'm in the bottom, tired of my lunch break. Down on the bottom is my grandfather. He was the first generation. And then on the bottom right, my uncle's wearing the graduation hat, and my aunt. So they went to my graduation. So most of my research is an homage for them. So a lot of when we look at agriculture, we know about the struggles, the travels, and the role they play in our lives. So most of the information, statistics from the U.S. Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Agriculture, just to give you some context, like 75% are born outside of the United States, 67% are from Mexico, 50% are undocumented. Majority are male or Spanish speaking. So most of my research is leaning towards mothers to get kind of like see if I can see their view about education. Also, the numbers are not completely. In most of the studies, they go from 3.5 to 1 to 2, but there was one that said that 1 to 2 million migrant seasonal farm workers. There's also a dollar amount of billions of gross domestic product. Granted, only less than 1% are farm workers are from all labor. Also in California, it's a $54 billion industry, roughly like 650,000 migrant and seasonal farm workers. And when it came to education, a lot of the literature was on camp, on the college assistant migrant program. And most of it was educational research. I didn't find a lot of sociological research pertaining to the parents. There was a lot of research done on camp experiences and how they navigated college and different forms of cultural and social capital. Also, a lot of studies discussed the importance of community cultural wealth, also coming from mentors, coming from counselors, and also a lot of help from fellow classmates. And most of them would talk about financial aid, the emotional and academic assistance. So I'll go to my research question. What are farm working families' attitudes pertaining to a 4-year college education and work? So for my methods, I want to do interviews in my hometown of Watsonville, California. I want to interview farm working mothers who are seasonal farm workers, because that's most of the Watsonville seasonal, especially in the raspberry fields. It's mostly a female dominated. The men work the hourly work year round. I'm trying to see if I can interview 6 mothers. Out of those 6, 3 that have sons going to a 4-year, and also 3 that have daughters that go to 4-year college, university. So far, I had a pilot interview thanks to my chair, Elvia, and also my sociology advisor, Haiti. Like, hey, I know you're barely starting, but how about you don't know where you're going yet? How do a pilot interview and see what you find. So I did a pilot interview. Some of the things that I was going to focus on were on the life story, work, and also education. So I interviewed Olguita. Olguita, she's the mother of my uncle's niece. So we're not that related, but she calls me cousin. So I'm mentoring her. She's an incoming freshman in camp at Sacramento State. And through those connections, she I've been able to mentor her it's going to be almost the end of her first semester. So knowing that she also works in the field, I'm like, okay, I have someone to interview and get some ideas of where I might lead my research to. So it was a 45-minute interview. It was hard for me because I tend to talk a lot, especially I'm very comfortable when it talking to farm working communities. So I'm from there, and I've been working since I was 14, 15 in the field. So that was also very good. So her life story: she came from Mexico. She crossed from Tijuana in 1994. She highlighted how her legal studies was an issue because she's been undocumented for more than 20 years. So navigating that has been really complicated since she could only work in the fields. And that was one of the things that she talked about. She didn't say what part of Mexico, because it was my first interview and I wanted it to go. I wanted her to tell her story and not interrupt what she was going to say. And then later on she was talking about work. This was very interesting because getting her perspective. I mean, I looked at work on my side as a male. I wanted to see her perspective. So these are a couple of quotes. She said, "La vida es muy difícil. Life is very hard. Waking up at 7 in the morning, getting home at 7 at night, and not just that, the responsibilities of being a mother, the responsibilities of being a wife. How like she still had to do that double shift at home after work." And most of the literature does say that. So it was great to see someone express it in their words. Adding that to that, the experience is muy triste, very sad, that it gets too cold, it gets too hot, like, and still having to wear layers because of the pesticides, and also because of, like, if it's raspberries, if it's blackberries, there's thorns, and having to go through that. So that was getting that, and also I forgot to add it, but like the importance of saying con el sudor de la frente, like that, still being positive about a lot of things, even though life is hard. It's muy triste, it's very sad. When it came to education, Olguita mentioned, el apoyo de los padres, parent support. That even though financially she cannot help her daughter because of her legal status, or because she doesn't have a work year round, especially, it's interesting because my cousin, I'm giving her the cousin, she recently, this week, she's like, hey, I need to talk to you, going back to this, because she's internalizing and navigating the fact that her mom is not working anymore because the season ended. So it matched perfectly how, like, even though she can't support her financially, she's still trying to motivate her. Like, hey, I might not help you, but trying to seek other people to help her out. And also, even though she can't help, she does have an expectation stating que corresponda con el esfuerzo, reciprocate the effort and sacrifice, that even though I might not have the best job, but I'm doing this for my children. And also, para que sean alguien en el futuro, so they can be someone in the future. How, like, those aspirations of her working in the field and, like, supporting her daughter and was very important for her. I'm going to continue doing more research. I'm planning on doing the interviews next spring, maybe in the summer. Continue doing more research. I mean, I've been navigating this research topic for the past semester, and it's been fluctuating left and right, but thanks to my advisors and my chair, I narrowed it down, I think. So, but any constructive criticism and advice will help. Thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter is Brian Mercado, a student at California State University, Northridge, and the title of his presentation is High School Administrators' Perceptions of Strengths and Barriers of Low-Income Chicanx Students. with behavioral, emotional, and educational challenges.
It's a long title, I know. But, you know, I don't want to move it. Is it just okay if I go on my Gmail? Just access it from here? Thank you.
Oh wait, I don't think I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
You can turn it on first, like open it up.
Thank you. Sweet. Okay, so for the introduction, and let's get started. Okay, so I think I should start this by giving a little bit of background on myself, locating myself within the subject. So I didn't thrive in high school. I guess I saw a lot of issues, and I didn't really begin feeling like an academic, like a potential academic, until I reached higher education, until I got into community college, when I took actually my first ethnic studies course, a Chicanic studies course. So my lived experiences within the education system transformed the ways in which I perceive the challenges that low-income students face, especially those who identify as students of color. So while in middle school and high school, I had complex and often negative interactions with administrators, and that made me look at the school districts and the larger educational system in a different light. How it was more catered, I guess, in a sense, to a colorblind type of ideology, which really, when something's colorblind, that's different language for a white background. It's not inclusive to all students, to students that are white, straight males. So while I sense that these administrators carried a desire to help students, I observed that the capacity of their roles and extent of the regulations governing what administrators could do hindered the help that students could receive. So having a little brother who is currently in middle school and high school, I see the work that I'm doing as very urgent. Oh, okay. Let's go. Okay, so moving on to the question guiding my research. So, what are high school administrators' perceptions of the resiliency of low-income Chicanic students despite the social barriers impeding students from attaining educational success in white spaces? So the research matters because it's imperative to understand how administrators see their role within the school and how they navigate challenges within their role. So most administrators are white. How can they relate? Not necessarily how can they relate. Can they work with people of diverse backgrounds, people who might be low income, who maybe be borderline homeless, who may be looking at issues in the home, who might not have enough to eat, etc. So it's important to the stakeholders of my study, the administrators of schools, and the students of the schools themselves to comprehend how administrators' multi-layered responses to discipline affect the educational experiences of low-income students of color and the respective communities. Furthermore, it is critical to gain a deeper understanding of how the educational system can be a barrier for administrators in order to better serve students who experience behavioral challenges. It is necessary to gauge how administrators view the strengths and barriers of students who are low income and who face adversity outside of an educational setting. Okay, so I decided to go with two larger theoretical orientations, social capital theory and critical race theory. And looking at it from the context of education, social capital theory is seen in the forms of parental expectations, obligations, and social networks that exist within the family, school, and community, which are essential for a student's success or lack of success. And using critical race theory, again in the context of education, it's looking at education as a white space. So again, like I said, attempting to see education as colorblind, but really the background always ends up being white. Whiteness becomes the norm, either culturally, socially, pedagogically, and economically. Okay, now to the meat of my presentation. So, the blueprint. I conducted 5 interactive qualitative interviews, semi-structured, with high school administrators. 3 of them identified as Chicanx, 2 males, 1 female, and 2 were white, 1 male, 1 female. And they represented 3 school districts in Southern California. It was San Diego, Ventura, and Los Angeles. Okay, so issues for Chicanic students. There is obviously this sort of connect between low-income minorities and the areas that they inhabit, their urban poverty. So an example is one of the administrators was talking about how in this high school in Los Angeles, there's a liquor store on every corner. There's no public library for 5 miles out, but there's liquor stores in each corner. 1 street over, there's a notorious gang that regularly recruits kids after school. But again, no public library other than the library that's located at the school for 5 miles out. Another aspect of the issues for Chicanic students is their access to resources. So another school district and another school had the issue with school lunches and transportation. So before the impact of technology on education, there used to be paper forms that would be sent out at the beginning of every summer where students could fill out forms in order to get free lunches. However, since it's been changed into more of a technology-based form, they can only do it online. Some people